Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome VFX Supervisor Scott Stokdyk, who joins us to talk about their work on the Fantastic Four First Steps. Scott will talk us through the invisible and visible work undertaken in a Marvel movie. Please be warned that there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Scott. Hi, Scott. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, hey, no problem.
We're here to sit down and talk about Fantastic Four First Steps, which has come out recently, and it's also now out on DVD, VOD, maybe VHS. You never know; somebody might make a copy. And we're here to talk about the film. But before we sort of jump into it, how have you found the reception to the project?
It's been great. I basically just hear from friends who are really positive, so I'm sure I get a one-sided view of it, but it seems like it's been well received out there, and I've definitely heard from a lot of people I haven't heard from for a while who really enjoyed it.
I think that's always like a big thing, right? If somebody sort of just pops out of nowhere and say, "Hey, I saw your name on the credits," that's always, I guess, like a really big thing. And I don't know, it's probably one of those things that you kind of just like, "Hey, I remember you," and then it kind of was like sparks up maybe lost friendship or even connections for working together.
Yeah, and it's nice. And but by the way, it's like I don't take for granted that people actually see what I work on too. And it's like if you do a Marvel movie, there's more of a chance someone will see it than something smaller or more obscure. But I'm happy when people actually just see it. So
Again, that's another thing. But then it's like with all arts, it always finds its audience somehow. Or I think sometimes you see, like on Twitter, or should I call it X, like people who worked on like what was it? It was a Sigourney Weaver film called Copycat from it's like that's decades old, and it was like number 2 on the charts or something.
I like
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and people like, yeah, I can't believe I think the writer came out and said, "Oh, I can't believe it's like charting," and people have seen it, and it's like, yeah.
And one of the movies I really loved working on was called Finch, and it was on. It is still on Apple, and not everyone subscribes to Apple, so it's like I still have a large group of friends who haven't seen one of the things I think I'm really most proud of, and it's like just because it's sort of siloed over there.
Yeah, exactly. Funny enough, I've seen Finch, and I know friends who were watching it because came out in America when I was in America at the time, and they really enjoyed it. But that could get licensed out sometime, and people go and watch that, and then you'll see all over the web people like Finch. Wow, maybe effects in that. But yeah, going back to Fantastic Four, how did the project come about, and what made you want to take it on?
Well, I got a call early in 2024, and there had been a script change, and there was a little shakeup, and the visual effects supervisor who was previously on it was not on it, had left, and so they were just meeting with people, and they called me. I had worked with Danielle Costa at Marvel back Spider-Man 3 days, the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3 days. She gave me a call, and I went out and I met with the director, Matt Shackman, and we had ended up having like a 2-hour conversation, which I thought was a good sign because we were just talking and talking about all the challenges, and he gave me a pitch, and it really it resonated with me, and it was something I wasn't really looking to take on a new project then, but it was so compelling, and I really, really liked Matt's take on it. So as soon as I got the offer, I was all in.
So basically, he wooed you. Basically, he was like, "Let's see what we could do." And I guess as well, like being in like a superhero sandpit, like I know it's not associated with Marvel, but Spider-Man, it's associated not in the film, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is now. I'm confusing everything, but back then it wasn't. So I guess having that experience, you kind of understand like people in suits and how they're going to move, especially like in something like this where you have 4 different type of characters who operate in such different methods as well.
Absolutely. And I hadn't done a superhero movie since Spider-Man 3. And it's, I mean, there's been so many since then. And it's really what I was attracted to is the fact that Matt had done WandaVision, and he did bring a different sensibility. And, you kind of do want to do a fresh take on something. You don't want to just repeat yourself. So that was an appeal to like be able to use what I'd learned years ago and apply it to a new take on it.
And it's funny that something that you would have worked on, well, it came out in 2007. So from sort of 20 years ago, if you started working on it, potentially, has kind of come back full circle at that same point.
Yeah. So basically, like, it is interesting to go back to what I did 20 years ago and apply it to now. I feel like so much has changed in the last 20 years in visual effects. It's like a whole new ball game out there. But weirdly, like, some of the challenges are the same. It's just like, how do you make something compelling within a frame, and it's just like something that like naturally doesn't look real. How do you get the audience just to suspend their disbelief and like buy into it? So that's there's still a lot of the similar challenges. It's just you kind of approach it technically in some different ways now.
Especially like for a film like this, we already mentioned like 4 characters are so different. Those shoot days must be so difficult because that there's going to be days where it's going to be really heavy in terms of the battle scenes, for example, or even the cosmic scenes, but even their like day-to-day life of, I think when there's a bit where the power goes out in Reed's lab and then Johnny's just there illuminating everything, and really cool to see visually. But then there's also, I can imagine it's so difficult to plan because you constantly have to think of something. And the days that you probably had respites are the days that are like the flashbacks scenes, what they probably showed on camera, where you thought, we can kind of relax on those days.
Yeah, but definitely we're always on our toes. And I would basically on set camp out by a camera operator, Daryl, and just like be there in case anything came up all the time, and just constantly watching and seeing. I feel like you still, even if it's non-effectsy, you still have to engage and like be in the moment and be always aware if there's something there's always something that comes up.
And I guess if it's something sort of in shot, and somebody will probably turn around and say, Scott, can we VFX that out? Is that possible? Can we like that take? And it's like, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and it's always, can we paint this out? The dolly track is in here on this part of the pan. Don't know if we're going to use it in the edit. Can we paint it out? What do we take time to pull it out and shoot a clean plate? Do we get balls and charts reference, visual effects reference, just in case like it turns into a visual effects shot? Or like, do we get a clean plate knowing that maybe you go back and reshoot some dialogue later over blue screen? And so like there's like, I've got kind of a running list of like a dozen things that could happen in any shot in any case when I'm on set.
What are the sort of common things, would you say? And then what would you say are the uncommon things that you have to think about?
Most common is paint work. And in this show, a lot of it came down to frame rates too, because we ended up doing a lot of action things where sometimes it helps to like shoot at more high speed so you get more frames to work with, knowing you may change the frame rate later. We ended up shooting our Galactus character, Ralph, as if he was a miniature. So we basically, like, our director of photography had special vintage lenses that he expanded to have a big depth of field, and we try to find angles, and so we'd shoot at like 48 or 60 frames a second and try to figure out, I mean, it ended up being just reference for us, but like what can make him look big, what really worked for this shot. And that was kind of an interesting challenge. Other than that, a lot of it is like the balance of, you've got a CG robot, you've got a Herbie in the shot. Do we use the special effects one? Do we use a puppeteered lightweight one? Do we go all CG? Are people interacting with the CG? That's a lot. I actually, like, the most complex thing is an actor interacting with something that's going to be done later in CG. And how do you deal with that and wrap your head around that?
And I guess you kind of, once you're there with the A camera operator, seeing how the shot is, how the scene is blocked, and how, if it's obviously you would know if it's going to be an action heavy scene or if it's just a family scene or whatnot. So that probably makes it a little bit easier to navigate. But then if it is like an action scene, then you have to think about, okay, get the stunt version of Herbie in rather than the VFX one, the lightweight one, because somebody might roll onto it by mistake and then in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of prep for action stuff too. You know, we spent, from the time I came on, and even before I came on, there's a pre-visualization team, and the director and the cinematographer are working with me and that team and sculpting shots. And then the stunt team comes on and they bring a whole other flavor to it. And they're doing stunt viz and they're videoing things. And so you kind of go into an action scene with a lot of prep work. So in a weird way, it's kind of like this zone of like, if it's all dialogue on a set, okay, I can breathe a little easier. And then it's like all action stuff. I'm coming super prepped, and there's a second unit team that's on it, and everyone's like so focused. And then sometimes you get in this mid zone where it's kind of less actiony, more drama, but then there's like one of kind of problems. So that's kind of where I have to pay the most attention, actually, is where it's like in that gray zone.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because you would think it would be an action heavy scene or something like that, but actually those smaller moments that, I guess that's where people won't notice the invisible work compared to a big action scene or when they're out in the in space as well.
Right. And it's I mean, it's trying to predict what happens in the editing phase of the movie is incredibly hard too, because you really don't know. There's tweaks to the story, and sometimes it's like pieces are reused. And you know, we definitely had cases of invisible effects where you had to change the costume of a character, you know, like because they're used in a different scene, and they're wearing the wrong thing, right? So you're actually replacing CG clothes, and no one should know, but it's like you have to prepare in case those things happen.
Yes, and it's it's probably you're being kept on your toes because you probably might be told the night before, the day or the day of, and you kind of think, okay, yeah, no problem, we can sort this out. And it's like, how am I going to sort this out? But then also that's the whole point of having a whole team behind you as well.
For sure. And another interesting thing on this show was like we had the most incredible stand-in for the Thing, for Ben Grimm, and we actually had a second actor on set in a full prosthetic suit with a full costume, like make clothes that were tailored to the size of our CG Thing, with like a prosthetic head and, you know, like 20 different changes of clothes. And would come in for a drama scene. I mean, because it's like, you know, there's visual effects in almost everything. So even a drama scene that has the Thing in it is a big CG setup for us. So we come in and Matt blocks out with the actors, rehearses, you know, Thing goes over here, picks up this, he's chopping something, he pats someone on the you know, back. So then you kind of shoot it with Evan in the mocap suit, and then you come in with this stand-in guy who is lighting reference. Sometimes we used him actually in shots and just replaced head and hands. And sometimes it's like you just kind of discover something in the space. It's like, oh, there's not enough room for him to be this close to this actor, or this actor needs to walk around a little bit wider so they don't walk through them later. So there's always it's kind of like pretty cool that there are those different challenges. And then I guess Silver Surfer was a unique one too, because she plays a lot in a lot of dramatic shots. So it's like, how do you get Jennifer Garner in the position if she's floating above on a surfboard? Do you record her later? Do you have her off screen and on like a video conference with the actors on set? So there's like dozens of these one-of different challenges that we're always dealing with.
Even with the Silver Surfer, you mentioned like those scenes, because there's probably a way that you've designed it because the camera's moving, they're probably wearing a mocap suit. that you can not, when you're sort of silvering up the character, you don't need to worry about the sort of reflection of the lens on them in a way, which is like, it feels like really cheating in a way, but then also you can then play around and finesse it a lot more.
Well, what's interesting is like we did have like a chrome had a 3D print of Julia that was painted silver, and would put it on set and just say, okay, what would she really look like if she was really here? And the weird thing is that there's a lot of like reflections that are distracting or are unflattering or emphasize the wrong area of the face. And we had heard this from people who had worked on the other Fantastic Four movies, how hard the surfer was. Really, like, we had to do bespoke lighting rigs and setups for the surfer. We had to balance surfer look. She had to look good and she had to look powerful, she had to look beautiful, but she also had to look like she was in the scene. So we would just cheat so much on it. We would put her in there, render it, and then it's like, if it didn't work, we'd actually like spin the environment around so that the reflections landed in the right place, or there wasn't a giant, like, if you're shooting a real actor or actress and there's a big glare right over their forehead, it's going to distract from the performance. So the DP will like flag that off, right? But we had to virtually do the same thing. We had to do our own cinematography experiment in post and make sure that she was lit in a cool way.
Again, it's so interesting to hear, but then also kind of blows my mind in the way that VFX works and how it's done, and how you still have to think about how they're going to be lit in a certain way around them, and how the city, for example, was going to be reflecting off them, and it could look a bit odd if it's just not right, or if the light's just pinging off there.
No, and it's almost like painting with a brush, because the first scenes where she comes down and she's in Times Square and there's a reflection of her on a screen behind her, and there's like red lights around. We kind of wanted them to like accent, and like you get like real red pings on the edge, but you didn't want them in front distracting from the performance. And I think literally, like, we did our development in one of those shots, and we might have done like 1,500 versions of the one shot before we got it to where we liked her, and that's like months and months and months of like a massive commitment of like nuance and painting, and once we cracked it kind of there, we had to crack it in like space and just solve it for daytime too. Those ones kind of fell a little bit quicker, but every environment was different with her, and everything was like just a labor of love to just be like, she has to look so perfect.
Yes, and it's, again, we just spoke about one location, then you mentioned all these other ones. Again, that's just something that's like, maybe in one point it works, that it works on like one location, but then you have to work on another location. But because you've worked on maybe a harder one, it's probably becomes easier to do a air quotes easier location.
Yeah, I do think you do learn every step of the way. I think it's like on hardest movies I've worked on, you go in and you don't know all the solutions for everything, and you start learning solutions, and you just hope that you like learn quick enough so that you don't get all jammed up at the end and have to, you hope to like make mistakes early and learn the hard lessons early so they translate to other situations and you can get payoff later.
Yeah, and again, it's so much probably is trial and error in how you're doing things or how you're building it all up, especially on a film like this where you do have characters who are all different. Like even Ben, for example, he may be rock, but how's the light going to reflect off him, or does it get absorbed, or what's that going to be like? Or even Johnny as a moving lighting beacon, how is that going to affect the scenes?
Yeah, and we try to do steps when we're shooting to just like give us tools for later. So we literally had like a rock, and she we gave her a name, called her Jennifer, because there's like Ben and Jennifer. And every take, kind of hold up the rock, twist it around with the light. So you see, like, and actually our CG character was modeled based on this rock. And we have a CG version of this rock. So you can like put in the CG version of the rock and compare it against the real rock, and like, did we hit the lighting? And then that helped with Ben with the thing a lot. And then for Johnny as a torch, we actually put an LED suit on the actor that would light up the environment. So when the lights are off, when you talked about that lab scene earlier where all the lights are off, literally like his LED suit is the only thing that's lighting up the whole environment. And then of course, all the reflections of that LED suit, you have to replace and paint out and like change and make it flame. But it's still like, it allowed us to like get a really realistic lighting of the scene.
And when it comes to stuff like that, where you're kind of building up the visual image for the screen, where do you begin? Like, I'm trying to picture like what the testing must be like for something like that, because do you do camera tests? Because I know you mentioned about pre-visualization, but pre-visualization with a previs, you could do it all on a computer, but then it might not just work in a real life. So how do you go about planning for those big scenes for something like that, where you know that it's going to be a VFX heavy with something like the lighting rig lighting Johnny up for a scene like that?
I think like one of the first things when I came on the movie, I was introduced to the cinematographer and the production designer, Jess and Kazra, and they had already had a head start where they had gone through and created this color palette for the movie, and like a very restricted, it was based on, like 2001 Space Odyssey, like 60s kind of color palettes, and The Graduate. And so basically all the set design and all the lighting was starting from that point. And so in visual effects, we have a lot of all CG shots, but a lot of it is like enhancing and adding to what's shot between the cinematographer and the production designer, and then extending and taking that same look into our CG shots. So we were lucky with our budget to be able to build a Times Square. So the first floor of like a lot of buildings, and it was like 3/4 scale of the real Times Square. And so you're already going and shooting, and it's like it's being lit by an amazing cinematographer, and the production design is great with this palette. And then we go in and we build on top of that. So I feel like it's all just a big collaboration, and it's like we have all these production meetings and just little meetings of me talking to the production designer and saying, hey, you're building this, but we need to extend this, or this practical monitor needs to have light coming out of it, and what color temperature should that light be so that it helps our visual effects. So it's just, in addition to this previs thing, which is a one team, you've also just got these different departments that are all working together. And I think for me, this is one of the biggest collaborations with other departments that I've ever had, because you can somehow, in different contexts, you can be like, you're in your separate worlds with your separate deadlines, but everyone kind of just came together with one vision. And I think it's also Matt Shackman, our director, had worked with Jess before, and they had a shorthand, and kind of like they were always in sync. So on a huge movie, it really helps when everybody's working towards the same movie, and it doesn't always happen, believe me, but on this movie it did happen.
Interesting. I guess again, film is always a big collaborative process, because if one person doesn't, goes against the grain compared to everybody else, then it makes it infinitely difficult to sort of actually get stuff done, and egos, arguing, so on and so forth, will make it difficult. And also, if you're kind of air quotes the new guy stepping in whilst everybody is already worked with one another, that's probably a little bit daunting, but then also exciting, because everybody's got that shorthand, so you don't need to worry so much. That it's kind of like everybody knows each other, so you're stepping in, and kind of need to catch up and learn that shorthand as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely was a big thing to step into and kind of find my place. And I think it's like, you know, one of the cool things at Marvel, they have these big like studio meetings and people are presenting stuff. And it's like, I kind of came in and I was really excited about it. And then I wanted to make all these suggestions and I was like, oh wait, maybe I should just like go on the side before I throw out all my ideas in this big forum. So it's definitely, there's some navigating of like when and how you say something, and you know, when to keep your mouth shut and when to open your mouth. That's definitely a big part of the navigation, especially when you're new.
And it is funny because you obviously want to make your mark on the film, but then also it's kind of like, as you said, you need to know when to speak and when to sort of maybe let everybody else sort of say their part and then step in afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're in a creative meeting and brainstorming, it's like there's definitely like a part of everybody's brain that wants to like get the idea, right? Like this is the idea and it ended up in the movie. And it's like, that was my idea. You see that on screen? I did that, right? Like, but like the danger in that is like, then you can start just like being like throwing out the obvious answers right away, just like it's a contest of who gets to throw out the ideas first. And it's like, it wasn't like that on this. It's like, I think everyone was super thoughtful and like took a beat in a moment and made some pauses. And there wasn't a scorecard there. It was about like, let's be thoughtful about this. And then everyone had interesting different ideas that weren't maybe the first idea that you think of. And I think sometimes that kind of elevates everything when you've got that collaborative environment and it's not like, that's my idea. I got it out, you know, like what kind of tree should we have here? An orange tree, an apple tree. You know, it's like, that's kind of, it's an apple tree because I said it's an apple tree. It's like, what, like, if you hadn't said it, somebody else would. And you're like, oh yeah, grapefruit tree. Oh, grapefruit tree.
But then you can get the director who comes in and is like, yeah, characters are allergic to apples, so we're going to go with something else. And then, you know, pick something that might not even grow on a tree, for example, or something even more outlandish. But then also, I think there was something that you mentioned was quite interesting is the idea stage of things. So you want to get on with an idea. And I can imagine that sometimes somebody could have an idea, everybody's kind of going along with it, but then actually when you sit down to go do it, you think, I don't think this is going to work. And I can imagine that's a little bit disheartening because then you go back to the drawing board, but then at least you know, and you have your, what's it called? You have some, you know, pieces and info that you can bring back and say, actually, this chunk would work. So if you did, you know, X and then we took Z here and then we put this bit here, then we can still do the idea, but then, you know, add a bit more to the pop.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big part of it is like, I think you like when you're doing this, you have to like not be precious about stuff and you have to let your ego go. And that's both like other people's ideas and my ideas. And it's like, I'm throwing out ideas and I try them and they don't work too, you know? And even like in editing, they're constantly trying stuff and like reworking and making scenes shorter and longer. And it's just part of the process. And you just, as soon as you embrace that process, then you don't feel any of the regret. You're like, we had to try this idea. And it's like, we tried it and we went all in on it. And we even shot a piece of it and we edited it together and it just didn't work. And let's go back. And it's like, as soon as you wrap your head around, that's the process and that's what I'm going to do. And then it's just like, you don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's probably comes down to like in the edit process where you might have shot scenes and then you're working on them and then it's not 100% because it just doesn't work for the context of the film, or you have to take something out, which I can, again, as an editor, you probably have to be quite brutal, and as a director, you kind of have to accept it, but then also all that hard work's not gone out the window, but it's just that moment where you think, oh, I just wish something of it worked, and it just doesn't, and then you kind of have to move on.
Yeah, well, we definitely had a big scene with John Malkovich and as Red Ghost and fighting these apes, and we worked really hard. Stunts worked hard on it. We did a couple shoots to get pieces of it. Weta did some amazing work. They did this astounding previs, and they brought some new ideas to it. And we were like 75% done with it. And then as they were editing, it's like, look, we want to get to this point of the movie quicker. When the surfer comes, from when the start of the movie to when surfer comes, like it's taking too long. We want to engage people tonally. It's a little different. And so like they went through this process and unfortunately had to cut it. And then, after the movie came out, there were still discussions about, can we go back and finish this? It's a nice standalone piece. Could it be another extended cut? And it's like, I mean, I don't know. That may or may not still happen. I have no idea. It's definitely up to Marvel. But it's like part of me really regretted not seeing this great body of work, that only the artists at Weta, and it's like a small group of people will ever see this, unless it's finished. But there is that kind of regret too. I think I regret less like little pieces that don't quite work that need to get adjusted versus bigger chunks that like really talented groups of artists have really poured their souls into, and no one gets to see it.
But then even for something like that, so I completely forgot that John Malkovich was supposed to be in this film, which blows my mind a little bit. But then also, as you said, it working on that scene and having it, and then only a few people have seen it, which in a way is probably, I don't know, it must be quite a little bit like a nice feeling though, being like we're like the select few that we could see it and enjoy it. And as you said, you never know, they might release it one day, or they'll be on the DVD extras or something like that.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, it's like I feel even more privileged to like have been there when it was shot, because I think Malkovich is an extraordinary actor, and just like on set, it's like it's a masterclass watching him. He was really impressive in person, and it like, yes, it feels good to like have that insight into this cool little action beat, but it's like, I think ultimately, I think time hopefully will let that come out, but it's like you can never reproduce the feeling of like watching that and just the magic on set sometimes. And what's interesting is I take that to other things too. It's like when there's a big special effects like explosion or stunt or big thing, I always try to watch it live, because like I have to look at the monitor for like issues or problems or things that are fixable or not fixable. But it's like I know that I'll be watching that little 5-second clip hundreds of times over the next 3 months, but I'll never get to see it live. So I love seeing big special effects or stunt things and just trying to watch live and be in the moment, because it's pretty special.
Yes, and I think sometimes, even from my experience, like the seeing things where you're kind of seeing moments being captured, and especially like when it comes to like rigging these shots and how they're done, and just how people are kind of like taken a few hours to do it, and it's like they could only do this, you've got one chance to do it. If not, we have to do it all, rig it again, and it'll take another day, and you're kind of just like, okay, cool, let's hope for the best, and it all works out.
Yeah, and I feel lucky to have watched like the evolution of stunt work from the Spider-Man movies into now, where I feel like, the stunt people are doing a lot of second unit stuff and really creative, like really contributing creatively to the process so much, but also their technology and like their wire work is like really elevated. And and their stunt viz has like gotten fancier. Like they're doing their own VFX on their stunt viz. So it's like while visual effects has evolved, the stunt world has evolved as well too. So it's really, they're doing an incredible amount of rehearsal and prep, and that's kind of cool to see as well. But it's like for our 0G work, it's basically we had a gimbal set, but most of the 0G stuff was done with wire work, and the stunt team basically had to rig inside of the Excelsior and then just rehearse with the actors to get things to feel natural. And then it ended up being so well set up that mostly we got the actors on the wires and didn't have to have stunt doubles on the wires, which is pretty unusual. So the stunt team was able to like get a technical enough wire rig set up and break down the shots, this rig for these shots, but also just get the actors so comfortable with their bodies and familiar with it. That was kind of awesome to see as well.
I think as well, when you're saying about like the wire work and stuff like that, that's probably quite cool to see, and how you can then work with how people's like movement are, how people are going to move, especially in space, because it is that you can have like no control over it, especially the way that they do it in the film.
Well, we were lucky too. We had a scientific advisor, Dr. Johnson, he's like a physics professor at UC Santa Barbara, and his like crazy genius who would advise us on all the space stuff. But we also had an astronaut advisor who advised us on like how they really do stuff and how they clip on and clip off, and just the nuances of zero G. So we're always like aware of that. And then it's like when you're shooting it, it's like the stunt wire like works for like 3 seconds and then it catches and it's a little bit off, and then like we might have to like replace a leg with CG or an arm with CG or do something like that. So we basically got, in many cases, all the way there, in some cases like 90% there with the wires, and then we would like take a scientific look at it and be like, does this really feel like zero G? Does it break anything because it's a wire and not zero G? And then what do we replace to make it seem 100% authentic?
Again, pretty cool about the like having a astronaut and space expert, because there's probably stuff that you think of when you're maybe as a kid, and then you kind of like, wow, I can actually get answers to this, but then the answers might not be as good as I thought they could be.
No, it was fascinating just to hear, about, it's like one of the astronauts' big thing is just like your orientation in space. There's no real orientation. And so it's like, we had to like shoot with different angles and actually like put people at different angles instead of just kind of having a terrestrial kind of frame of reference. And then it's also, the other thing he said is like, basically there's a very, very, very little amount of force required to push off, And so it's like on the wires, you have to like do a much bigger force, but it's like in space, it's just like, boop. You're just floating very, very, very quickly. If you're not careful, you can fly pretty fast around in zero G.
Yeah, it's quite funny as well that like they destroyed the illusion a little bit, right? With what you want to sort of do in space, and how it's not maybe as cool as it actually is in real life.
Right. The other thing that was challenged was the hair, the zero G hair, when Sue takes off her hat. And that was going to be obviously, like, if you have gravity, that's going to be a big visual cue that you aren't in zero G. So we took the leap of faith to replace her hair. We just had like a tracking helmet on and just did all CG hair for Sue and that whole sequence. And that was a challenge because it doesn't look like underwater hair. It has a completely different feel. So of course you're looking for all this reference. And I think it's like we were just struggling, and it's like we kind of physically knew what should be happening. There's just a stiffness near the base of the head, and then it's more free floating near the tips and stuff. And we had a lot of good footage. And then while we were still struggling with it, like the whole thing where Katy Perry went into space, and like all of a sudden we got all this footage of like 5 women in space with hair doing interesting things. And we're like, well, a big part of it is like, you don't want it to be distracting. You do kind of want it to have a beauty to it. And so we ended up like kind of reworking how we sculpted it to just focus more on making it beautiful with real physics as opposed to real physics and just whatever the physics did, what the physics did. So that was kind of a fun exploration.
Fair enough. I think as well, having sort of stuff like other shows and films that you can probably use with space, but then also be like, well, we've seen it how they've done it, so maybe we can then just amend it. And I don't want to say improve on it because that sounds quite rude, but make it better, make it look more polished, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's like I think I'm we build on the shoulders of others, and every challenge, even if you don't quite get it, you learn something from it. And there's been a lot of underwater CG hair over the years, and that's been hit or miss because it's really freaking hard, right? So we definitely wanted to like get something that didn't feel like underwater hair, but felt natural, you know?
And again, how do you go about doing stuff with water as well? I know James Cameron's managed to do it, but that's probably taken him many, many, many years, and his team as well. And also he's an expert in diving, so he probably understands how the way water flows and moves, and even the smallest bubble in there might affect how something is done.
Yeah, and you get teams of experts at stuff. And actually, what's funny is I worked on Titanic back in the day and did some water tests for Titanic using new software at the time that it like was kind of revolutionary and like pattern waves in a way that people hadn't done before. And I benefited from that software. And it's like you get these little clusters of like experts that if they aren't 100% expert at the time, they become experts. It's like for the space stuff, Interstellar did some very cool, black hole kind of stuff before, and we had to do this neutron star that was similar. And it's like, there were artists who had actually worked on Interstellar who came in and like, yeah, we did this cheat and we made it a disc. And now we look at like, there's more science, there's more math about it. It's like, yeah, it's like the accretion disk is a torus and it's not a flat cylinder. And it's like, there's all these patterns inside that they mathematically know now. So this whole new group of people went in, examined the new science since Interstellar, and kind of became their own experts at it, talked to Dr. Johnson to get his input. And so we would have like weekly meetings with Dr. Johnson, and it's like the team at Framestore would, like all their math experts and effects experts would kind of present something, and Dr. Johnson would be like, yes, but it probably would be like this and this and this and okay, and then go away and come back again. So like you get these clusters of experts who like elevate their craft and become a super expert on something, and they may not ever use that again in their whole life, right? So it's like, but they spent like half a year or a year becoming an expert on some little niche thing, and then they go away and do something else on the next show.
And it's funny as well that like somebody can be an expert for however long on something like that. Because it's the same with, I remember going camping and we just had a lot of rain, and somebody had just spent the past like 3-4 months talking about like drainage in fields and how they can create like create a way to drain, get the water to move somewhere from a flat plane, and you just think, oh, perfect, we need that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, very early in my career, I worked on this movie Hollow Man, and it's like Kevin Bacon's whole insides were created like with a medical accuracy that was so good. I think they donated the 3D model, to some medical facility afterwards because there was so much work put into it. And like at the time, it took like 2 hours to like load up the model in your computer. Like the artist would like load it up and go away and do something else and come back. But it's like I learned so much about the internals of a human body. But again, that's like 20 years ago, and it's like how much of that do I remember now? Because I had this little window where it's like, oh, I know so much about every little muscle in the arm and how where they attach and how they should retract. And now I'm just like, I don't remember that. So, but it was fun at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's again interesting how all that work that people can do and it works out really well in the end, and how that it can people's work can still live on without even realizing that it's there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I sometimes envy the people who get to like leverage something show to show. Like for a while, we on the Thing and all his complex facial animation, we engaged this incredible animator, Andy Jones, who has worked on Avatar and Lion King and all these, huge movies. And he's like an expert in facial stuff. So he's forgotten probably more than I'll ever know about it, because I kind of dip my toe in and out. And it's like he would basically get on calls with like all our Thing visual effects vendors who are all doing facial animation and setup. And he would just like have so much knowledge and just elevate everybody's work. And then it's like, he's going on to his next show, and he's like, everything he's learned on our show, he's taking forward. And it's just like, he's an expert who's going to live in that world his whole career. And I kind of enjoy dabbling in it and getting a little bit what I need to know for the movie and then moving on.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think as well, like there's probably so much that you do learn and take from each show, and especially with something like VFX, where it's not necessarily always going to be the same every show. It's like, how we're going to take little snippets from here and there to improve on what we're doing, and how we can, just because there's so much you guys still do.
And I definitely feel like I learn a lot more from my mistakes too. So it's like, hopefully I don't repeat the same mistakes movie to movie. And, even within a movie, if I make some mistakes early in a movie, I can recover and hopefully fix them by the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And there is probably so much that you can still learn and understand what people are doing. And especially, as you said, like the text changing every so often, tech changing very often, I should say, that you can kind of have to like keep pace with it to just not get left behind in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like there's this whole AI rabbit hole we could go down, but it's like I have gone down it, and I will continue going down it. But what definitely excites me more sometimes is like the old school, like the cinematography of it. And it's like I feel like I learn more about cinematography from every director of photography I work with. And it's like a lot of times in visual effects, in post, you have to be the cinematographer in an all CG shot. And it's like I would call Jess up and get his input on stuff, but a lot of times you're art directing stuff, and that's something that, I mean, AI isn't as good at yet, but it's a skill that I feel like I kind of refresh all the time, and I keep learning all the time.
Yeah, and I don't think AI will get there, so don't worry about that. Just to hit you up with my final question, what was your favorite scene to work on?
Oof. That's a good one. I feel like it's a toss-up between the space chase with Surfer chasing them in zero G and the birth, and then the end final scene where Galactus is going through New York, because that's like the New York thing is like classic kaiju, Godzilla, Kong, just the things that I love about visual effects and old school visual effects. But the space birth, the zero G thing is like something I've never seen before, like that elevated drama and the birth within an action scene. So they both appeal to me on different levels. I don't think I could choose between those two.
That's fair enough. At least sometimes it's like choosing your favorite scene is sometimes like choosing your favorite child. It's very, very difficult, and it's how can you put yourself through all of that? But those are very solid choices as well. And I think that Galactus scene when he's walking through and you feel the scope as well. You, like, even when you're in space, you can kind of cheat by how big he is, but then in the film they cheat by showing the Statue of Liberty compared to what the size of he's like, and it's just like, wow, okay, maybe there is maybe we should be scared of this person.
But by the way, it's like emotionally I liked it, but I also it's a culmination of so much work of building our CG retro future New York City, which was like, I could talk an hour about that. Is just like one of the hardest environmental challenges I've ever done, is with ILM team and ImageWorks team together, like building two huge chunks of New York that had to come together and then get destroyed. So like the payoff of that was like emotionally for me, like, oh wow, like all this hard work did pay off. So I like that aspect of it too.
I think as well, when you're building a city where we kind of have a preconceived notion of what it is, but because we're on a different planet, as in different world, elseworld, should I say, you can play around with it a bit more, right? And just be like, well, it is New York, but is it actually New York, New York? Can we just like change it up a bit? Can it be like old New York, mix of new New York, and then, maybe a little bit of, Scott New York here, and then Jess Hall's New York over here, and sort of play around with that.
Yeah, and I feel like even like all the billboards, there was this whole other thing of like, we can tell stories through the billboards, and some of the crew came up with their own billboards, and the art department gave us billboards, but it's like there's period advertising and period looking advertising and just like a whole texture there that was like really cool.
And I guess that's where everybody kind of wants to just put their idea in and hide somebody else's idea.
Well, that's but I mean that there are bigger areas of sandboxing you can do where it's like, okay, this is like a little part of the frame, go for it. Bring your ideas. There's no bad idea if it's just a little accent.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see who makes the final cut. Scott, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Yep.
The Fantastic Four First Steps is out now on DVD, VOD, Blu-ray. Go out and watch Scott's and his team's visible and invisible work. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. You take care, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.